Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is April 25th. This is the bi-weekly council briefing. We have 3 items on the agenda for this evening. The first one is for the HR director to have a conversation with you regarding the city attorney's annual evaluation, which is about 6 months or so away, but to make sure that you're all on the same page with what process will be utilized, since there's the possibility the process may take a bit of time to actually conclude. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Human Resources Director Kim Bennett. Kim, the floor is yours.
Awesome. So can everyone hear me? Yes. All right. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to talk to you about what process and the forms that you would like to use for the city attorney's performance evaluation. The city attorney contract states that the city council shall review the city attorney's job performance at least once annually. The first review being on or before the city attorney's anniversary employment date of October 7th. So currently there's no process in place and we don't have any agreed upon forms. So although it's a little early, I'm here today to get feedback regarding the method and the forms that you would like to use. To give us a starting point, I've attached 3 items to the briefing memo. I have a draft copy of a proposed process and timeline. I have a sample evaluation form that city council would fill out. And then I have a sample evaluation form that the city manager, deputy city manager, and the directors would fill out. You may notice that this is comparable to the process that we use for the city manager's evaluation. This is actually by design, as the language in both of their contracts is similar. So I'm recommending keeping the process consistent. The evaluation form that I'm proposing that council fills out is based on a compilation of evaluations from other municipalities and from the ICMA website, which created their form in conjunction with the League of Cities. The city manager director evaluation form is just based on questions other municipalities use, along with input from our city attorney. So I'm needing guidance in 3 areas. What do you think of the process and the time frame? What do you think of the proposed city council evaluation form? And also, do you want input from the city manager, deputy city manager, and directors? And if you do, what do you think of the form that's created for us?
So the first hand up is Councilor Dumont.
Not off mute. Thank you. So yes, I like this. First, I just want to say thank you, because with our last city attorney, we did not have any guidance, and we just had a process that ended up being a case study, so on what not to do. So I thank you for providing a framework. Since we have 2 employees, the 2 employees should have similar, not exact, but similar evaluation mechanisms to be able to do that, which includes input from directors. And because the city attorney also has to work closely with the city manager and the deputy city manager, I think it would be helpful for us to also have that information. Because at the end of the process, we as a body decide what the evaluation will be and if there will be any kind of a financial increase to the city attorney. So the more information that we have, the better it is. And the more information that we have from different perspectives makes it much more helpful to us. So yes, thank you.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, I'll just keep it short and sweet. I think it needs to be consistent with the city managers. I like the process that we use there. And as long as we remain consistent, that kind of keeps things on an even keel as far as I'm concerned. I like the direction that I see right here, and I'm all for it.
Councilor Golding.
Thank you. Kim, thank you so much for all the time you put into this. This is exactly what I had envisioned that we would be doing for the city attorney evaluation. And I agree with Ms. Dumont that we definitely want to get the input from the city manager and the deputy city manager and the directors. And so basically, I support everything you've done, including the timeline. And again, thank you so much for this. This is exactly what I would like to see us do.
Thank you.
Let's see, thumbs up from two of the others. If there's no other comments, I think item 1 might be done. All right.
All right,
Got the direction you were looking for. Thank you very much.
thanks.
Okay, with that being said, we'll move on to item B, which is Dune Walkover discussion. Several of you have brought up questions about the Dune Walkovers, how many will be ramps, ADA compliance, maintenance, etc. So here to give you an overview and seek some direction is our Public Works Director, Dennis Barron. Dennis, the floor is yours.
In council, can you hear me? I guess not.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. I'm having internet issues. Isn't that always fun when we're trying to do this? So I'm here tonight to talk to you about Dune Walkovers and
Uh-oh.
Lost Dennis Barron.
This is about to be the fastest briefing in history.
It
I
might
think
be.
he might have hit the wrong button.
Oh, here it comes.
Here he comes. There he is.
Dennis, you'll use up less bandwidth if you turn off your video and you just speak. So that might help alleviate some of the issues that you're having. Although we love to see your happy face. Turning off the video will speed along the volume, the audio.
And Dennis, I'm still here. I can share the screen if you need me to.
no, we're going to give this a shot and see what happens because we don't need to see me anyway. Okay, so now can you see the first two Dune Walkovers, First Avenue South?
No.
We are not seeing screen sharing yet.
Now what happened to my screen share? It's because I lost video right in the middle of it. Now it's it made me reset here. Hold on. We're gonna get this.
There we go. It's up.
Okay. Go into presentation mode. Okay, now you got a full screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what I've got is all these pictures were taken within the last week and a half or so. So these are actually our newest Dune Walkovers that are just completing construction right now. So of course, this is the First Avenue South. Of course, these new ones are being designed with the new parameters to be 3 feet above the top of the dune height. These were originally designed in 2018 prior to raising the dunes 3 feet. So the entire stack of designs that we had were all too short to be able to cross the dune. So these were all designed now to be able to clear the height of the dune. Now, keep in mind that dune changes a lot from day to day, week to week, month to month. Even as you can see in these pictures, the original design was for that platform to be 3 feet taller than the dune. And you can see as it is in this construction picture, it's already at the dune height. So expect that the sand and the dunes are going to continue to evolve as these items continue to go. So right now, our current finished floor elevation of our walkway itself is at approximately elevation 17 feet. So to get there, a lot of times you've got to have stairs to get up, and you're going to have stairs to get down the way they're being currently designed. This is the next one that we have, which is 4th Avenue South. This is a ramp design. It is not an ADA ramp design, but you can see the new alternate floor pattern in the second one on the right. That's the alternate that we bid around this time, which is actually an open material to allow the sand to go through. So you can kind of see how it's doing exactly what it was expected to do, so that as you track sand up that, it actually falls through and goes underneath the ramp and not actually building up on top of the ramp. 11th Avenue South, again, another one that has stairs on both ends. 13th Avenue South, this is the one I think that kind of brought some emails about to most everybody, and myself included, about the number of steps on both sides to be able to get up and down, to be able to get across those dunes. This is the Latham Plaza, the City Hall ramp. It's got both terms depending on what set you look at. Again, another one that was constructed with stairs on both ends. So the way we have these right now is we are planning to we design 8 every single year to be constructed. And we're currently building 8 right now. With that being said, I think 6 of the 8 are completely done. I think 16th Avenue South is still being completed if it's not completed already, and they're still working at 34th Avenue South to get that one in, to get those done for the year. So our construction is right on time for finishing up by the end of April, which gets us into turtle season. We have to have all of the pier work done and a lot of the stuff that we're going to do on the dune completed prior to turtle season started. So we've already reached out to our engineering firm. We've already given them the next 8 to do. So as a clarification, they're not picked based on any other thing other than I inherited a spreadsheet where the original design criteria was if it had a ramp previously, it was going to go back with a ramp. If it had stairs, it was going to go with stairs if a ramp could not be constructed as part of that. So as part of the 49 dune walkovers that we have within the city, when we're finished reconstructing them all, we will have 4 ADA ramps. We will then have 25 non-ADA ramped accesses, and we will have 18 ramps with stairs as those get completed construction. And I've got a whole giant spreadsheet with the intention of when every one will be constructed from the time, the ones we're doing right now to the next ones to the next ones. That list, however, is always fluid in motion based on the fact if we have something that tears one of them up or we have an extreme maintenance issue, we can always substitute one of the other ones in place when we get to the design portion to be able to get it designed to be ready for construction prior to the next construction year. So the next 8 are already being designed and to show. And so just to get an example of the next 8, 5 of them will have ramps. So this time around, we had quite a few more stairway options. The next batch is going to have significantly more ramp options being built. Any questions before I go on to sand?
Dennis, we do have some hands raised. The first one is Councilmember Nichols.
Hey, Dennis, how you doing?
I'm great.
Hey, no, I like the design where the sand falls through. What's the plan for cleaning out the sand underneath once it builds up to where there won't be room for it to fall through anymore?
Is
there a method? Is there a mechanism or a way to clean out underneath?
There really isn't a way to design to clean out from underneath. It just kind of falls through until that point in time that the sand builds up enough to be at the level. And realistically, what will happen it will gradually begin to overtake the ramp. That's some of the next discussions is talking about maintenance of sand. How do we want to treat our walkovers, from our ADA walkovers to our non-ADA walkovers when it comes to sand itself? And as you can see in the left side of this picture, you can see that, that whole last full section is completely full of sand at this point.
Right.
Already kind of taken it over. And so we don't have a maintenance plan that says once the sand builds up or once the dune takes back over, we do not clear it off. We do not keep them open. That's kind of the next part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Councilor Jansen.
Hey, Dennis, just a quick question for you. Did you say the second slide was non-ADA?
Yes.
Is that because it doesn't have the handrails on it? Is that the only reason, or is it just for my own informational purposes? Why is that one not ADA?
There's a different grade requirement when you have ADA ramps. They're only allowed so long, and then they have to have a flat resting portion. And so when we construct a non-ADA ramp, they may be longer than what an ADA requirement is to be able to have a resting portion, or it may be at a slightly steeper angle. The idea and design is you'll be able to drag coolers, bicycles, strollers, fishing carts, stuff like that up and down these ramps, but they're not set and designed to be the standards of an ADA compliant ramp.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. So when you note that those ramps that had those walkovers that had ramps will be replaced with ramps, are you talking about dual ramps? Are you talking about ramps on one side or another? Because the infamous one at 13th had ramps on both sides.
We kind of
You're breaking up.
Facing north.
How convenient. Isn't this what they say? Like, don't like the answer.
Apologize. So our direction as it is it have a ramp to north. So the left side of this picture faces north, the ramp to on the right side of this picture faces south. And so with the nor'easter, the amount of sand that they deposit on the ramp, that is part of our design alternative. We don't want to have them face the other way.
If you guys could hear what he was saying, the ramps intentionally face to the south, so that way the nor'easters don't push the sand up the ramp, and it provides some shielding to minimize accumulation. And
But my question was, there are ramps, previous ramps, old ramps, that used to be a ramp on one side and the other because the dune height requirements were lower. So from the parking and walking area, the west side of the ramp, you could go up, the west side of the dune, you could go up a ramp and then down a ramp. And some of those are now changing to upstairs and possibly down a ramp or stairs on the other side, because there's not enough land area to be able to create the ramp on the west side of the dune. And that is what the one at 13th is dealing with. How many ramps with the traditional ramp on both sides now need to be stairs on one side, either on the west or the east, versus two ramps? So it has to be a stairs and a ramp. Do you have that information?
I do not. All I have realistically is a division that says access type, whether it's considered to be a ramp or whether it's considered to be stairway. And due to the new height requirements, if we can do both, we're going to probably end up doing both, if at all possible, rather than two ramps. But there's a lot of outside factors, not just with the amount of easement or amount of area we have to move these ramps across, and as well as what DEP will allow us to do. Obviously, to make the ADA, there's a lot more switchbacks required, especially with this new height. And so while the one, like I said, the switchbacks with the stairs, a lot of people get that choice. I think that would just be design as we proceed forward as to what we want to do or how we want to try to explain what we want to do when they design them.
Because some of them that had ramps before, because now you have to go 3 feet above the dune, a new ramp would be like a 45-degree angle, which really isn't a ramp at all. And so how I'm looking at this is our ultimate goal of all of the walkovers is for people to not walk through the dunes. We don't want them creating a little path on the side of all these walkovers. We want them using the walkovers. So in my thinking, the end goal needs to be to create as less friction as possible for people to be able to use each one. Scratch that, not each one. We can't do it at each one. to use as many walkovers as possible to be able to lug all the beach stuff from one side to another. I mean, that's how I'm looking at the thing. And I have more stuff for the sand section. So I've moved those over to number 2. But thank you, Dennis, for your time.
Hey, Georgette, were you referring to 13th North or 13th South?
13th South is one of them, but we have a whole bunch on the south end that have ramps, but then those ramps have been turned into dual platform stairs that people have been using for years with their bikes or walkers or heart conditions and such, that they were able to get easily onto the beach, where they can no longer get easily onto the beach from the closest beach access point. Doesn't mean that they can't get onto it from a nearby beach access point, but not from the one at the end of their road. Does that answer your question, Dan? Okay.
And exactly what you were talking about is some of the things that we constantly are at battle with when we're trying to design these. Everyone wants to go to the one that's most convenient for them in relation to their house, or where they live, or where they're staying, or just where they decide to cross onto the beach. So we've got particular design parameters that we follow, which were, like I said, I inherited them, and by all means, that's the direction I'm looking for. And if that direction is, hey, we'd rather you never build another set of stairs in Jack's Beach, I'm okay with that. I will push forward to make that change and make that recommendation in future design, if at all possible, to basically say, look, unless we just run out of real estate, then we'll have to put stairs. We have no other choice. The one thing to keep in mind is that these accesses are designed to keep people out of the dunes. There is no requirement that we have to have 49 walkovers to keep people out of the dunes. That was a choice and decision that was made by Jacksonville Beach a long time ago, to have this much access available to the public to allow them to do it. It is a very double-edged sword, because everybody wants to use the one that's been next to their house forever, and they want, the most convenient access possible.
Can I jump in real quick before? I'm sorry, Fernando. If Fernando needs to go first, that's fine. I missed one of my questions that's not sand related. Do we want to think about putting in another ADA access ramp? How I understand it, it's one ramp per 4 miles of beachfront, and we are a little over 4 miles of beachfront, and we have 4 ramps. So we might want to look at, 1, putting in another ADA ramp, and 2, at the ADA ramps, having more ADA parking available for those ramps.
Pardon me, but I think it's 1 ramp per mile is the requirement. Is that
That's
correct?
not what I said.
So let me, hold on a second.
Yeah, 1 per, for 4 miles, you have to have 1 per mile. So we have 4, 4 point something miles of beach.
So let me, Mr. Stefopoulos and myself and Miss Sandy have researched this long and hard to come up with this question: is, do we have the right amount of ADA ramps? So what the determination is, there is no requirement for any ADA ramps in the city. ADA ramp access only applies under federal law, and we don't have to follow what that federal recommendation was by the federal ADA to provide walkover access ADA compliant. So I think it is in our best interest to try to do the best we can to be able to provide access, but there is no absolute right that we have to provide 4 or 5 or 6 or 10. There is zero requirement. If I understand that, Ms. Robinson, if you'd like to jump in, that would be awesome.
Hey, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I think in summary terms, what you've described is correct. It's, these are new issues for me. I've never had to deal with beach access professionally before, but my reading of the law is that it is not ADA access for beaches is not required. And so to the extent you undergo that process, depending on how you describe your structure will affect whether it has to be ADA compliant or not. So if you describe your ramp as a facility or in the nature of a facility, it has to meet the ADA requirements. If you simply describe it or characterize it as beach access, it would not have to be ADA compliant. So a lot of it depends on how you're labeling the outcome. That's what the opinion is right now. It is maybe subject to change, but so far it hasn't changed from those broad parameters.
So with that being said, by all means, that's again additional guidance I would need from the council to know that the recommendation would be to increase that number from the 4 existing ADA ramps to whatever number the council would desire that I work towards meeting above and beyond that. The parking, I kind of addressed in the memo a little bit. I agree wholeheartedly. However, we have one big issue, which is the number one most popular ADA ramp is at the end of Beach Boulevard, and there is, I believe, 1 or 2 parking spaces, and that's it. And all the rest of it, you have to utilize paid city parking. So that particular ramp, there's not any way, unless you guys buy some property or do something down there to be able to accommodate a parking lot right there at the end of Beach Boulevard. There's no design for any additional parking above the 1 or 2 spots, I think, that's right there on that cul-de-sac turnaround for ADA. So that is the first requirement. The other 3, by all means, I think we're already looking at that. And Mr. Stefopoulos and I have been talking about that piece of it, is because if we're truly going to call these ADA accessible walkovers, we probably need to try to guide our ADA needed visitors and guests and residents to these 4 locations. And therefore, we probably ought to accommodate additional ADA parking or handicap parking at those access points, if at all possible. We want to try to, we want to do more than what might their code require, but not necessarily get so many that we've got 47 empty parking spaces, and then somebody who is non-ADA has to walk a significant distance because there are open parking places, but they're not allowed to park there. So we don't know exactly what number that is, but we're guessing that that's going to be somewhere maybe around 6 or 8 parking places at each one of the 3 accesses. Is something we're kind of looking at as we redo and restripe these parking lots to how to accommodate it. And I know the park on the south end with the other ADA ramp, that's going to be part of the projects 4 and 5 that to be redone in that parking lot. So that'll be an ideal time to be able to restripe and accommodate that particular parking lot. Pier parking is another one. Again, that pier parking lot, which will directly attach right to the boardwalk, will be another opportunity to be able to look at how many ADA do we need in that area and what's the right number to be able to accommodate the public.
Councilor Meza.
Dennis, hello. Thank you for putting this together. Question. So the new material that's being used on these walkovers, that's what it's going to be used moving forward. Am I correct?
It is. So far we've been happy with it. As a matter of fact, I think we're even talking about it doesn't necessarily work great on the ends when you round the corner, but we're actually talking about having the next set to design when it gets to the second level of ramp to go ahead and include it a little farther up, so that if sand is carried up to the second tier of ramps, that'll go ahead and fall through as well, because the material is doing really well at removing the sand, especially what people are tracking on their shoes, their feet, or whatever they're hauling.
And the second question I have, so I know the hotel that's being built next to us, the pier, I think it's the Spring Suites, and I know they just built the walkover, and it's pretty amazing. I just walked through it earlier today. But if I remember correctly, weren't they supposed to match the material that the city is using, or was I imagining?
You are completely correct. I have been in contact with them since before they started constructing that. I provided them all of the city specs as well as all of our designs that we've done so far. They have made a business choice that says they are not going to build it to meet our requirements, and therefore there's no intention that that will ever be a city ramp. That will always be a private ramp. It will always belong to Spring Hill Suites.
Well, that's very sad and to hear, but okay.
Yeah, we did provide them the info and ask them to build it to our standards. And I don't know if it just got too costly or exactly what, but when they started construction, we started asking those questions, and the decision was made as they have no intentions of us taking it. It's going to remain private.
Yeah, I just think that's a slap on our face, but all right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Counselor Golding.
Thank you. Dennis, so I have several questions. As you know, 16th Avenue North has been brought up several times and we've talked about it. And I'm just curious, because we do have an issue there at 16th Avenue North with people going around the walkover and not using the walkover. Is that an opportunity? Do we have you guys looked at it? Do we have an opportunity to put ramps there instead of the steps?
I have not. Actually, 16th Avenue. Hold on a second. I'm trying to look at my list.
Can I break in here for a second? Is it a new walkover or is it an old one?
It's an old one right now, but it's
okay.
Slated to be replaced.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's slated for what I say is 22-23, which means it should be under design right now. So I will have to make that phone call to find out. Like I said, that's what it's originally designed, according to what I inherited, says that will be a stairway ramp access as what the guidance I've given them. So my I guess one of my questions or one of my bullets for guidance would be is if we want to go down the path of saying, no, we want ramps if we can possibly get them. I guess that's the guidance I need. I have 3 that have stairs. The way that's set right now with the engineer to be designed with stairs. So 16th Avenue North is one of them. 3rd Avenue South is one of them, and 22nd Avenue South is another one. So I don't know what the particulars are. Like I said, we engage our engineering firm to begin design based on the fact that this is where it's at and this is the direction we've been given them to say they need to go back in stairs. Some of these are having to really get farther west. We had that issue on 16th South as we got all the way back and we were not above the dune. And we had to extend it on back into the parking lot and onto the sidewalk area to actually continue to make grade. So, some of these we're kind of doing on the fly based on that. But I mean, overall, like I said, I'm still moving forward with the direction I was originally given, and which is kind of why I'm wanting to make sure that's still the right direction we want to go, or whether we want to try to refocus and understand that, no, we want ramps at all costs if we can all possibly get them. And that's the guidance I need to move forward.
Well, the thing about 16th Avenue North is we've got several hotels in that area. So 16th Avenue North is used a lot by the hotel guests and visitors too, because there's a street, a beach access there. But I'm just curious because it's very obvious that a lot of people have been not using the walkover. So it's, to me, it's kind of like, why would we spend the money to put a walkover in if people aren't going to use it? And so if there's an opportunity to put ramps in there, I would appreciate you looking at that to see if that could be done. And I guess it would depend too on, I don't know that it needs to be ADA compliant now. And are you guys saying that we have determined that we can do ramps and they don't have to be ADA compliant? Because that was a question that came up in our last briefing, was could we do ramps that were not necessarily ADA compliant? And it sounds like that's what we are doing.
You are correct. From what Mr. Stefopoulos, Ms. Robinson, and myself, and what we've kind of looked through, is this is not the same kind of a construction as it has to be for a sidewalk where we have to make it ADA compliant. There is no requirement to get beach access to ADA individuals. So we don't have to provide ADA ramps at all. So we can build non-ADA. My idea is when this is done, if you search Jacksonville Beach ADA ramps or ADA beach access or handicap access, it just pops up and tells you where the 4 are located that you can get access to. And I think at the end of this, when we get all finished with this, we definitely are going to try to come up with some form of an interactive map that'll kind of list out, hey, these are all the ones with ramps. These are all the ones with stairs. These are all the ones that are ADA compliant, to try to steer people towards what they have. Now, that also means you're going to probably be able to find a parking spot when there's a stairway, but you might not be able to find a parking spot when it's all a ramp, and that's what you've got out there to the public. But that's going to be what that's going to be. So from my understanding, from what we've looked at, is there is no requirement to build any more ADA ramps, and there is no requirement that the ramps we build have to be ADA required.
Okay, so along the same lines with regard to the federal law requirement, I would just ask, is there, because we do get federal dollars for beach renourishment, was that considered? Did we look at that? Because I want to make sure that that we understand, is some of this ADA, is the ADA requirements necessary for beach renourishment dollars?
I can answer for myself. That was not a consideration or a factor at all that worked itself into the analysis. So I'm happy to look at it with that piece of information, but that was not something that was provided or considered earlier.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we need to make sure we check that out, because we don't want to find out later that that was a problem, and then that affects our ability to get beach renourishment dollars.
So
and that was a grant?
Doesn't do anything with that.
Was that a grant?
It's federal dollars that I don't know if anybody else can explain how we get it, if it's a grant or what exactly the proper.
It's federal dollars that go through the county and the state. And so the county and the state split some of the beach renourishment, where the city does not pay for renourishment of the beach.
I asked that question because I just want to know if there are conditions that were associated with it, because the conditions would impact the answer.
Well, I know that Atlantic Beach has had quite a bit of debate recently about parking in Atlantic Beach for beach access, and that was tied to beach renourishment dollars. So apparently, like in Atlantic Beach, they have to maintain a certain amount of parking in order to be able to get the beach renourishment dollars. So I just wanted to bring this up to make sure that, since the ADA requirement is a federal requirement, that it's not tied to beach renourishment dollars as well.
Parking is tied to the county putting in the money, not the ADA stuff. The ADA would be federal, but that may be a requirement for the federal dollars that goes to the state and the county to be able to get to us or to get to the beach.
Okay, so and one other point, in the memo, Dennis, you have a little paragraph about maintenance where you say that Public Works monitors the construction repairs as needed or reported to assure safe walkovers, and it's handled by the Streets Division as part of the normal maintenance and repair program. So I'm just curious, is there a schedule for checking the walkovers on a regular basis by our Streets Department?
They do check them. I don't know that it's on anything of a regular basis. Usually when we get the report of a of a loose board or a loose step, then we'll go out and we'll check them all at that point in time. We'll repair the ones that need to be repaired or that we have an order for, a work order for repairing, and then we'll check all the other ones. But we also count on other people to let us know, especially a good example would be lifeguards that cross those and are in the area as well, to be able to keep a monitoring of those. So again, this is additional work on the street department above and beyond everything else that you and I have talked about over this last week. So as we continue to stretch that department thinner and thinner and thinner, there's opportunity there that, we could do better. It's just hard to do that with what we have for people and abilities to do it now.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know, based on the statements in the memo, if that meant that there was some kind of schedule that you guys followed. So it sounds like you don't have a specific schedule. So going back to
If we do, I don't know exactly what it is. I know they do go out there and they do it, and I know we end up with one or two guys that are assigned to do maintenance and repairs as we get them. What that schedule is, I don't know, but I know it is part of a routine schedule, but it's not a weekly schedule. Keep in mind, Beach Raker collects all the garbage on the beach. So a lot of times they'll let us know if they see something. And then we've got guys in the street ends every single day collecting all the garbage in the cans in the street ends and doing all that piece. So we've got guys that are monitoring during that process as well.
Okay. So going back to 16th Avenue North, I'll just reiterate that it would be nice, and maybe I need to look at this and myself and see, but if we don't have any walkovers in that area with ramps, then I think it would be good for us to try to see if there's any way that we could put a ramp in on both sides at 16th.
So
Because
by design right now, 19th North will have a ramp, 18th North will have a ramp, 17th North will have a ramp, 14th North will have a ramp, 12th North will have a ramp, 10th North will have a ramp.
Okay.
So there are significant numbers of ramps, but that also is directly next to one other one with a stair. So you're going to have two with stairs as of it's designed right now. And like I said, if the guidance is to try to do every one of these in ramps, by all means, of course, that also comes up with the next piece that we're going to talk about, which is maintenance of sand, which becomes even more prominent on the ramps than it does on the stairs.
So can you repeat that again? You said 19th, 18th, and 17th will have ramps?
19, 18, and 17 have ramps.
On both sides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, then in that case, I don't think it's as critical that 16th have a ramp. It's just disappointing though, because people continue to bypass that walkover. They're not using it. So again, it's kind of like, well, okay. Do we spend the money on it if people aren't going to use it? Thanks, Dennis.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. If there's a ramp, people are going to use it. So I would like to see if there is a consensus among council for all walkovers that have not just been redone, if we want Public Works to determine those that have been deemed steps on the west side, if it's feasible for us to make them ramps, and if it is feasible for us to make them ramps, for them to report back and say what the cost differential would be. Because I mean, that's really the main crux of this issue is we're looking at crossovers that some were ramp, and now they have to be stairs ramp because of the angle of the ramp that's needed on the west side or the east side, mainly the west side. And the feedback I am getting from residents and visitors is they need an easy way to get their stuff or themselves from the east to the west. So is council in agreement that we want Public Works to look at all of the future walkover plans and determine which ones are feasible for putting ramps in. And for those that are not feasible with our current right-of-ways and parking for putting ramps in, are we willing to look at what the options would be to try and squeeze in a ramp and maintain parking? And I don't know if I can say that about council, or if that's a question that needs to come from Mike. But that is really the crux of what we're talking about here.
What's council's thought on Public Works doing that as an exercise? Seeing 4 heads nod. So Dennis, that might be something to take a look at.
Definitely do that. And then now, like I said, if I could just basically provide them the direction that says we're going to put ramps on everything and both ends, and unless there's just a flat reason not to, because we do have a couple which are on a very strict easement to be able to get out to the walkovers. And keep in mind, some of these don't have parking at all, especially when you get down in the south end. The parking all falls apart, and there's no parking at all near or on those ends to be able to provide those. So I'm going to guess that means the same for those.
Yeah, so maybe to clarify a little bit, so would the parameters be provided that there is room to install a ramp without physically modifying the end zone or the current parking arrangement?
Not without the parking, because in some you might have to modify the parking. In others, especially when you're talking about the south end, there are some really tight places, but keep the end goal in mind. The end goal is for people to not walk through the dunes. What is the way that we can provide the least amount of friction to get people from the west side of a dune to the east side of the dune? And are we as a city willing to take on the cost of getting people to go from west to east and east to west in an effort to maintain our dunes, which also maintains the safety of the city?
Councilor Nichols.
I just think most people that aren't going to use the walkovers are looking to go from point A to point B in a straight line, just like they don't use pedestrian overpasses over a bridge. And I watch people all the time that even when there are where the ramps do exist, they're going to go through. We just need to sign it better to let them know that it is illegal to be in the dunes from those locations. I just think the cost is going to be prohibitive in creating these, but I'm not against taking a look at the cost, but I just don't foresee having the ramp really changing the people that are going to choose to avoid walking over, and they'll just walk through the dunes.
And Dennis, based on the memo that you've put together, of the 49 walkovers, 27 will have ramps and 18 with stairs at one or both ends. So it's really 18 of them that you just need to take a second look at, correct?
Yeah, and I think we're actually 3 or 4 of them are with stairs built right now. So realistically, that 18 probably drops down to 14, because unless we're gonna look at putting these in year 27 to rebuild these ones with stairs again to provide ramps, we will get through all of them in fiscal year 26-27 will actually be the final 49th one will be completed in that budget season, provided we keep the same rate going. So
okay,
I can fine tune those numbers tomorrow with the spreadsheet and be able to provide back a short little blurb back that you can forward out. Which ones are completed and which ones would be done, and that shouldn't be an issue.
gotcha. Okay. Counselor Dumont, your hand is still raised.
No, it's to mention the cost differential. It is an $8,000 cost differential between stairs and non-ADA ramp. And I think that is well worth the reduced friction for people seeing stairs in their wagon versus a ramp in their wagon. They're more likely to go over it with the wagon, over the ramp with the wagon than through the dune.
I disagree.
Of course.
We'll have Dennis take a look at it, again, keeping in mind that each of those 14 locations may be physically laid out different. So that pricing might change a little bit based on configuration. But so Dennis, you'll take a look at those and we'll get some additional information out.
Yes, I will. And that should be fairly easy. Like I said, of the ones that are under design right now, there's only 3 that are being designed with stairs. So that should be a relatively easy change to make for the upcoming cycle, to at least look at those. And then I'll put all the rest of them together and kind of come up with a number as to how many more that's really entails messing with. Although I don't know that we'll get all the way down to basis of design until it's the year before they're being designed and they actually are going out to design, know yes or no whether it'll fit. So we'll just have to function forward with the idea is we're going to put a ramp in unless it's just not possible whatsoever. And in that case, we would revert to stairs.
Okay. Are you ready to move on to the maintenance of sand?
I am. So currently Public Works does not do any maintenance of sand whatsoever. Once we build these, that's it. We let the sand do what the sand's going to do. As it gets deep, as it moves, I've seen these completely covered. And then shortly thereafter, I've seen the sand move back around again. And now you've got excess of sand sitting on top of the walkovers, you know, where the dune is now receded or has moved around to be able to do it based on the weather. So what we're looking for is the second question, of course, here is do we want to increase that level of maintenance of sand on the ADA walkovers? And the reason I mentioned the ADA walkovers is because if we're directing handicap and ADA accessible ramp areas to these 4 locations, should there be a higher level of service expected so that somebody with a wheelchair or a disability would have a greater access or a greater ease of being able to make it all the way to where the sand meets, you know, the ramp meets the sand. Now, let me caveat that to say we're not going to keep these completely clear of sand, like in the picture on the left there, where the sand level is there. That's going to continue to be there, because if we clean that all the way off to the bottom where the ramp is at, when you get to the end of the ramp, you're going to then have a 3-foot step to get back up onto the sand. And that's not going to do anybody in a wheelchair or anybody who has a physical disability for being able to walk down that, use the handrail. They're going to get to the end, and then they're going to be looking at a 3-foot step that they got to climb over to get onto the sand. So what we're really talking about is keeping the sand build up off of the dunes above the level of the sand outside. So I think my next slide, I can get it to advance now if it didn't go to sleep on me. It was a good idea of that on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side picture here, what you'll see is the sand on that ramp is actually above that bottom board. So there is in excess of 6 inches of sand on that ramp, but you can clearly see the sand has receded to down below that. So the question I'm really asking is, should we be maintaining these ADA walkovers at a higher level to be able to assure that people with disabilities have had the best possible time of being able to make it to the beach? Right now, the only one that does any maintenance of sand at all is the one in front of the lifeguard station, and that is simply either our paid lifeguards or the previously VLSC lifeguards were taking it upon themselves to keep that one cleaned up and scooped out and out of the way and clear of sand. So That's the only one that there's any maintenance being done of, and that's being done by not my department. So I do have some costs. I started this memo with the idea that I was going to have some costs in hand. I did get those today, utilizing Beach Raker, who our contract is through, that collect the garbage and do the other things and already on the beach for us. And the cost that they've put forward right now is a cost of $2,500 per month to upkeep only the 4 ADA ramps. And that would be to the level I say up to, that would be accommodating removal up to 2 inches of sand. So if we have a nor'easter come in on a weekend and it dumps 4 inches of sand on top of it, they would then request an hourly rate to clean all 4 of those off until they get them down to the maintenance level again. And then they would go back to their maintenance dollars to be able to upkeep them. And like I said, this opens up as much as I would love to say we could do all 49 of them. This would be a huge enhancement request by me in my budget, to the tune of 4+ people, full-time employees to do nothing but upkeep ramps on a daily basis. And by ramps, I mean all walkovers from north to south. And then trying to keep that job filled, which is also the job that has to perpetually remain open right now because of the opportunities to try to fill it at that rate of pay. So the second and third question, I guess, is really, do we want to entertain the concept of talking about enhanced maintenance of sand on the ADA walkovers? And then subsequently, do we want to begin down the path of something presented in my budget that would accommodate maintenance of sand on all walkovers?
With Councilor Golding.
I would like for us to do something to maintain the ADA walkovers because I feel that it's important to at least try to make the beach accessible to people with disabilities to the best of our ability, whether that, maybe that is Beach Raker that does it. I don't foresee us hiring 4 more people to do that. I'm not sure that I would support going in that direction. But the other thought that I had is that with regard to the other walkovers, I'd really like for us to consider setting up a program that would be like adopt a walkover program where we could have, maybe there's neighbors that live in the vicinity of the walkover and, like you do with the Adopt a Street, program where people go out on a regular basis once a month and they clean up a segment of street. I'd really like for us to consider something like that because I would love to see the community get involved in helping to keep the walkovers maintained. And if there's something that we could do like that, I would love to see that done.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, so I agree with Councilor Golding in the aspect of maintaining the ADA ramps. I think that's important. Let's be honest, when it comes to all the ramps, you're going to the beach. You should have some expectation of dealing with sand. I think that's part of going to the beach. But when it comes to the ADA, I'm all for maintaining that. I think that's important. The question I would have for you, Dennis, is does it have to be done monthly? Can we consider like a quarterly maintenance instead of 12 times a year, 4 times a year?
Well, and I wasn't proposing monthly. This is a daily maintenance program that they would make sure all sand is blown off, all sand is scooped off, all sand is broomed off every single day of all 4 of those walkovers. So they would be in the best possible condition all the time. The issue with setting them onto a quarterly basis is one nor'easter and they're buried with 4 inches of sand. And that's when the phone starts ringing of, I can't get across it anymore. And so then, and of course, that's also when we've got trees down. That's also when we've got other things that we're dealing with throughout the city. So that's one of those pieces where I could talk to them about doing an hourly scenario on that scenario based on quarterly. I said, what I requested was just give me a monthly cost that says, hey, how much you're going to charge to take these on, and they would be kept clean. If you're doing it daily, you're probably, the only time you're going to get into the hourly cleanup is when you have a full-on storm that comes in, because if you clean them up every single day, you're not going to build 2 inches or 3 inches of sand unless you have a nor'easter or a named storm that actually is really causing that to happen. So
Sure, I'm not suggesting daily. I'm thinking a longer amount of time instead of monthly. But of course, I don't have a good measuring stick as to how often that would really have to be done. Certainly after a storm, but I wouldn't think too many people are accessing the beach, during a nor'easter as per se. At least I haven't seen that many.
No, but you'd be surprised at how quick, as soon as that nor'easter lifts, they want to get right back out to the beach. And now their walkover is covered with sand. And it wasn't yesterday, but now it's got a foot of sand on it. And I can't get there as easy as I could the day before. So
sure. Well,
you're exactly right.
Right. There'd have to be some understanding of that.
And Dennis, just to make sure we're all on the same page, their cost is $2,500 a month to clean each of the ADA walkovers once per day.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's a daily service, and they
up to $2,500
per month, up to the number of inches.
Up to 2 inches. So if they come in on a Monday morning and we had a nor'easter on the weekend and there's 4 inches of sand, they would automatically just go into hourly mode for cleaning off the 4, whatever it would take, until they get those all 4 cleaned off, and then we would continue to pay them. So what you're in essence paying for is extra people to come in right after a storm to be able to clean everything off and then go back to normal maintenance.
Yeah, daily seems a little excessive to me. I mean, I think that we could cut that back some.
I think it just gets to be that fine-edged sword between daily and even if you change it to weekly or monthly, you're going to have that accumulation that happens, and it happens very quickly. So even on a monthly basis, you may automatically every time be into the hourly rate just to get them all cleaned off and back to normal again before they take over that cost. So I can ask for some additional numbers. It was right at the buzzer to get these numbers that I have for you today. So I still continue to work in progress to see what I can come up with based on what we've got, and see what we could come up with to feel comfortable about. I don't disagree. Daily seems a lot. But I also know if somebody's with a blower is walking each one of these daily and clearing all the sand off of it, they're going to be clean every single day, and they're going to be good every single day. If you start going once a week, I've watched the beach change completely in a week's time, and watch the walkover completely go to being buried in a week. So it can happen even under normal circumstances.
Councilor Nichols.
I guess my question about the ADA ramps is, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because the soft sand is not a ADA approved. It doesn't work for ADA until you get to compacted sand. Has anybody contacted a ADA advocate group or something to discuss this issue with? Seems to be it would be more appropriate to increase the handicap parking around the lifeguard area, where they have the mats that can actually roll out to actually allow them access. I've never seen somebody in a wheelchair access the beach from these. And I just think there's got to be a better way, where if we're going to spend additional money on ADA compliance, that people in need of those facilities would not just be, led down a path to where they can't go forward anymore. Seems like there'd be a better way to do this. But has any groups been contacted? Has there been any input from people with disabilities?
Whenever we've tried to go down that path, it's a very hard question to ask, because they want access all the way to the water. And
exactly. But if we're only giving them access to right there, it just doesn't seem like it's. I mean, it's if you're not doing it all the way to the water, why are we even doing it?
And so a good example is this picture you're looking at right here. If you look in the left-hand picture, you'll see the stroller. If you look in the right-hand picture, you'll see the stroller wheels where they had rolled through that same area. This is the beach boulevard. If you look at the right-hand picture, you'll see the very edge of that mat peeking out from under the sand.
Yep, I saw it.
This picture in relations to, here we go. Here's the next picture, which is Beach Boulevard. So
There you go.
this is what it looks like. The sand is completely covered the mat. And so the only thing you can do is pick up the mat and lay it back down on top of the sand. So then what your next issue is the mat keeps raising higher and higher and higher. The only thing we figured out to be able to do with the mat would now be extended all the way up the ramp on the picture on the left to continue all the way up the ramp until the sand quits to be able to be usable. And again, that's back to somebody has to lift that mat every single time there's sand on it, or they have to blow that mat off to assure that there's no sand on it. So I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think the best bet for us to do is to try to get the best ADA access we can possibly provide, but you do have to understand that we're not going to get people all the way to the hard packed sand. There, I don't see any way. And then so anytime we start asking, the first thing everybody points to is these mats. But these mats are also problematic, in my opinion, from what I've seen, because they do create a tripping hazard. They create a liability to try to you can see what we've got to deal with right there as far as maintenance goes. So is the maintenance idea to keep these mats completely uncovered all the way to the end of the ramp. And then when you get to the end of the ramp, you're still going to be walking through the soft sand for the next entire ramp area all the way back. So it's I don't know what the right answer is. And I know anybody we've talked to with a wheelchair doesn't have a good answer. They don't want to use the beach wheelchairs.
Yep.
They really want to roll from their car or vehicle all the way to the hard packed beach. And I don't know of any answer to be able to do that. There's no design of ramp that lets us build it that far. And I don't know that DEP would approve it if we stuck one way out there to be able to do that. For one, it would cause issues with vehicular transportation between Public Works Department, Ocean Rescue, and everybody else that has got permission to be on the beach. The minute we have a ramp going all the way out there would cause a lot of vehicular problems, especially when the wind really blows up that water level even higher.
All right. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. With regard to the ADA ramps, ADA does not just mean wheelchairs. And so I think that's another piece that we need to put into our thoughts, where when we start looking at marketing, we may want to market the Beach Boulevard access as the most wheelchair friendly access point onto the beach, because they can also get the big wheel chairs. But ADA means a whole bunch of things. So not all of them require those mats. I just want to note that up front. I think those of us of a certain age are very used to, when you say ADA, you think of a certain typology, and ADA has expanded beyond that. I'm trying to read my writing here. There is a lot of sand on the ADA access points, and I would agree with beach rakers, doing it, yes, daily, because wow, that sand really can pile up, and the whole beach geographic makeup can change daily. So one day you go there, it's one way. The next time you go out there, there's a big old cliff to get to the hard sand. I understand that people with ADA issues may not always be able to easily access the hard sand. And that's just a point of life. it's not that ADA says, oh, you should be able to access the hard sand and be able to go frolic in the water, but you should be able to enjoy the serenity of the beach, the breeze, the feel, the salt air, and all of that stuff. So it doesn't mean that you need to get to the hard sand. It just means you need to be able, people should be able to enjoy the natural riches that we have at the beach. So I think when we start looking at, we need to get the ramp out to the hard sand, we are thinking in the minds of able-bodied individuals that we just want to run out into the water and go into the water and not just enjoy the beach as the beach with all the ambiance that the beach can have. I do like your grates on the beach, on the ADA access points that lets the sand fall through them. I am curious as to whether it's legal for sand to be shoveled off a beach access point. And I ask that because I may or may not have seen a constituents or a non-constituents post of shoveling sand in Florida, like as akin to shoveling snow to like get through your sidewalk on a way to get to the beach. And I'm looking at that going, I don't think you should really be shoveling the sand because that kind of negates the whole purpose of why we have dunes, which is to block the water and bad stuff. So no names, no things, may or may not have happened. Could have just been a dream. May have, may not have. But so I don't know what the legal ramifications are for us to remove the sand when the whole purpose of dunes and the grasses is to build up the dunes and not degrade the dunes, which is why we have the walkovers. Now the walkovers have to go up a certain height. We don't want people walking through the dunes. We want people off of the dunes so they can continue to grow and build to provide a protective barrier for the community so we don't lose our houses in hurricanes, or we have the least amount of house lost or property lost during a hurricane. Yeah, I kind of rambled there. So Dennis.
So in response, removing the sand from the walkover is different than digging the dune. So we're not talking about moving the dune, changing the dune, altering the dune whatsoever. The only thing we're talking about is the sand that is accumulating onto that ramp. Now, keep in mind, under the new guidelines, these ramps should be 3 feet above the height of the dune as designed. So we're not altering the height of that dune. We're not altering the configuration of the dune, but we are maintaining the clearance of the sand off of that walkway.
And that's legal, even if the sand that's on the dune is within line of the sand on the walkway is in line with the sand on the dune.
From my understanding, the dune height, which is as set by DEP, if that dune comes over the top of that, no, we don't normally clean that out in a lot of ours, but ours are normally right now set so low, they don't meet that guidance. Right now, I could take out what's on the ramp and still be below what the requirement or above what the requirement is for DEP on the dunes, from my understanding.
And so for the slide that you currently have up, what you said would apply to that picture on the left. Because the picture on the left kind of shows the ramp above.
Correct, above the corner.
Right. And so you'd be able to remove all of that sand and still be within legal stuff, the legal okayness.
From my understanding, yes. Now, once we get to that corner, it may.
Okay, so you're talking about the lower corner. I'm talking about the upper part of it.
Right. Once we get to the corner that you can see in the left-hand side here where my mouse is at,
yep.
That's or the spot where we wouldn't want to be able to take any more sand off, because we still got to meet to the beach level when we get down to the ground. And that's what some of it gets really hard to say is even maintaining these ADA walkovers. I don't know that there's any sand going to be taken off of either one of these slides that you're going to be able to see, because if you do, you're going to be 3 feet below the beach when you get there, and you're going to have to have a ladder to climb out of the hole to get off of the ramp to get up onto the beach. So neither one of these two pictures, even with Beach Raker doing their daily maintenance, I don't think this will change whatsoever what you see in either one of these two pictures.
Can you go back to the other slide for a second?
I can. Oh, sorry, too far.
The other side. That one. So what you're saying is all the sand that we see here on the left one that goes up would remain. So people still have to get through that sand before they would get to a clearer ramp going forward down to the beach.
I mean, the idea here you would have to taper it and make it work. If the sand on the left or the right-hand side of the rails is below this, we could easily clear it off with no issue. Once it gets to the sand is at the same level as the beach itself, we wouldn't clear anymore. It would just naturally flow and become beach.
All right. Yep. That's my question. Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor Hoffman.
I just wanted to add really quick on the cost of Beach Raker. I do agree with giving special attention to the ADA ramps. $2,500 and daily compared to zero and never seems like a big jump. So I feel like there's got to be a happy medium. I totally understand that the sand shifts and dunes shift and all of that stuff, but I think we should maybe ease into it and see what the real needs are before we commit to $2,500 a month for essentially 4 ramps. That just seems like a big jump again from zero and never.
Yeah, and so when I did the quick math today, taking 20 days and 4 ramps and the 2,500, I think I come up with about $31 per ramp per day. So if you've got somebody with equipment that you're providing and you're paying an hourly rate, even if you're paying $15 an hour, let's just say, loaded labor rate's going to be double that. So that's literally 1 hour per ramp per day, 20 days a month, Monday through Friday, is a good comparison as to how quick you can get to $2,500.
Oh, I mean, when you do it daily, yeah, you can get there really quick, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think it needs to be done daily. I'm with Dan, who I think he was thinking more monthly or even quarterly. So I think we should try it out, see how it looks, and then see if we need to up that investment. I'd just like to know, I guess, is there a happy medium? So I know you're running with recent numbers, but I think there's got to be something in between.
Sounds like there's a consensus from council that we focus on the ADA ramps in particular and take a look at some options, maybe like a pilot test to see how it actually works for a few months before we make a commitment. And I think that's probably something Dennis and I can work out with the finance department in terms of securing some funds, getting Beach Raker out there, trying a few different options, see which works the best, and then see if we come back with a more formal proposal for the 2023 budget for you to consider.
Beach Raker did give me a quote on an initial cleanup, which is kind of like, hey, we're going to start now and get them all ready to go, which was the same hourly rate, which even at 40 an hour per man hour is not necessarily a horrible rate to get us to that happy place to say, okay, we'll start here and now we'll monitor from here. So.
Okay. Dennis, do you get the direction you need on this particular item?
I did. I think we're great.
Any other questions from council before we bid farewell to Dennis for the evening? Seeing none. Okay, thank you, Dennis. And we will move on to our third item of the night. Review of the Legislative Policies Manual. I will kick this over to Sandy Robinson.
All right. Good evening, everyone. At our meeting last Monday, the Legislative Policy Manual was on the agenda for adoption. And as you may recall, a citizen spoke up during courtesy of the floor, brought up certain deficiencies that he detected. And this document was deferred for action and asked to be put on tonight's schedule for discussion. So prior to tonight's meeting, a copy of the legislative policy manual as it was drafted and proposed amended at the time was circulated. Today also were the written comments that the citizen had prepared prior to the last council meeting, and from which he spoke at the last council meeting. And we've also included a copy of the Florida statute that he at the time opined that our provision on emergency declaration was in conflict with. So the purpose of this discussion is in part to address his concerns, but also to provide council with another opportunity to determine what its goals are relative to the legislative policy manual, because I'm not quite sure, in view of how the matter has been referred, that we are prepared to say that the document is in its final form. So I prepared a memo which addressed very summarily the allegations or the comments that were made by the citizen. And one of the comments that I focused in on was relative to his opinion about our emergency declaration. Now, our emergency declaration, which is contained at 9.1 in the legislative manual, and let me know if you need me to pull that up or if you have that at your fingertips and can refer to it on your own. But 9.1 is verbatim of our charter and our city code. Neither of those documents are in conflict with the recent changes to the Florida statutes. In my review of the Florida statute to which he pointed and our language is this: our policy is not as comprehensive as the Florida statute. I don't think it was intended to be that comprehensive, number one. A conflict exists when you're speaking to the same things and the terms are different. We don't have that here. The amended language that he was focused in on really deals with emergency orders. I am not going to broadly interpret emergency orders to include declarations. I think there is some support of that by the Florida statutes, because in that same provision, the legislature deals with orders and declarations, and they use those terms distinctively. And we know for statutory construction, you don't substitute one term for another. So I think it's apples and oranges. If you were to broadly interpret the term orders and say that our declaration can in fact be an emergency order as well, we still have a difference in language, because this new language extends to those kinds of orders that impact an individual's liberty, such as curfews. Our emergency declaration provision doesn't go that far. It doesn't appear to be intended to go that far, and so there is no conflict there. There were other comments that he made relative to the structure of the document. I think some of those comments are very well taken, and I think I can be more particularized in my comments on that to that end if I knew what the intended goal of the policy manual is or was at the time it was first envisioned and when we thought it was completed. And I raised that question because in going through the manual itself, we incorporate quite a few statutes and charter provisions, and for no apparent purpose other than to fill space. So there's no cohesiveness in a lot of the provisions that we have there. So the question becomes, what are we intending to do with this document? How do we see it effectively guiding not only the city council, but to the extent we want it to be utilized by our boards? What is it that we want as our outcome? I think once we answer that question, then not only can we better evaluate some of the suggestions that he's made, but also on our own determine what things can stay in or what things are better out. I'm eager to hear that particular discussion. I have some comments of my own, but I would like to just sort of reserve those and share those as a part of a discussion rather than to sort of list them, because I did not spend a great deal of time going through this provision by provision. I read it all through. I made notations as to why certain things are there. Raising the question, why is this here? When you get to the code of ethics, you know, some of my comments that I made to myself were comments that I incorporated in that code of ethics training, kind of raised them in terms of hypotheticals. But it would be a good time to sort of have an opportunity to talk with you if you are considering amending it further before it's adopted. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. These are just kind of general thoughts about what I was looking at. So I'm all ears.
Councilor Jansen.
The only thing I wanted to add to what you just said is that in Appendix 1, the Code of Ethics, that's not, that language is not consistent with the language that was adopted in the Code of Ethics that's already on the books. So it had been changed or altered somewhat. So those two documents are not coinciding with each other. It should be the exact same one that's already been ratified by previous council. I don't care for the redundancy in here. I think we discussed that there's a lot of copy and paste from other areas of law and governing. And I think that we should just rely on our ordinances and those policies that are in place wherever they're in place, whether it's through, you know, resolutions, ordinances, or wherever it is, our code, that kind of thing. So, but moreover, I think this is going to take some time for at least you to review, and, you know, and it's going to take a substantial amount of time, the way I see it, to get it consistent and make sure there are no conflicts if we go forward with the way it's being written right now.
Councilor Dumont. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sandy. Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. I agree with what Dan said. Sandy, we know this wasn't your work, because it would not look like this if it got to, you don't send stuff to us that's cut and paste and what's that word? Higamajigamy, or it's a Southern phrase, like paste together, literally paste together, not good. So we know that this isn't your work. And I am sure that when you look it over and you understand what our intent is, which is to take stuff out of ordinances, which is harder to change for us to be able to do our day-to-day operations, and put it into a legislative manual, it'll be much cleaner. Minus, with the exception of, as noted, there's already a gender neutrality issue with the current document. That aside, which I am sure you'll take care of, the one piece that really stuck out like a sore thumb, minus the stuff that you've already noted, the redundancies and all that other stuff, is 7.3 in liquor licenses. And so I am not sure that this is something that should be moved to a legislative policy structure and not kept in its original place. I don't, that was the one thing that really kind of just stuck out to me. Why are we looking at liquor licenses as council policy versus a legislative larger policy piece? So that just kind of stuck out to me. Again, that one is 7.3. I also noted that this was done under the former city attorney. And what I would like to see included in this is not only the city manager evaluation process, but also the city attorney evaluation process. So this way it's clarified for any future councils. Going through my notes. Mayor Pro Tem needs gender neutrality, defining chair. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Counselor Golding.
Just to chime in here, my understanding was that this legislative policies manual would be a good way to put everything in one place so that the new council members and even the current council members and the new board members and current board members have one resource to go to. And that would include not just what's in our code, but any resolutions that may have been passed, because I don't know that our resolutions get actually put into Muni code, right? So there's a lot of things that we may do that are not easily seen or found or whatever that we would want to have documented to provide us the guidance that we need as we do our jobs. And so I just feel that there's definitely work that still needs to be done on this, and I would certainly appreciate the opportunity for us to put a little more time into it, for Sandy to put some time into it, to try to clean it up and make it what it needs to be. Does that make sense, Sandy?
Yes, it does, but it really doesn't, for me, squarely address the question, what is the intent of this? I understand that for some people, it might have been to just be a compilation of everything that council has done, to provide guides for the future. But to some extent, you almost everything you do could fall in that category, which kind of makes the manual at some point less effective. I really honestly don't see why you need to have charter provisions and code provisions in the manual. By putting them in the subject matter in the manual, it doesn't give you per se more control over those things that are codified or in the charter. You simply now have it in 3 places as opposed to 2 or 1. So the key would be when we were looking at amending the LPM in the recent past, the reason we were doing that was to get rid of those code provisions that addressed basically parliamentary procedure for all practical work. It wasn't law until you put it in an ordinance. And so our point was, let's not shackle the city council with having to abide by something that they could easily suspend on a majority vote, or just for the sake of efficiency in a meeting. We don't want you shackled by this being in the code, because you can't easily change things. And those particular provisions lent themselves very nicely to being folded into the legislative policy manual. But to Councilor Dumont's point, her reference to section 7.1 dealing with 7.3 on the liquor licenses, some of that is informed by the charter. So just because you put it in the legislative policy manual doesn't mean that you all of a sudden get control over all of that language. It just simply means you've got a lot of repetition. So knowing what the end goal is, I understand sort of having a central source, but that's going to be limited, I think, just for practical considerations. What then is the other competing primary objective of having this document in place? I think a good use of it would be if you have provisions that are in your code or in the charter, don't necessarily lend themselves to being repeated in the manual, but let's just say there's a provision where you're authorized to do something, but the manner in which you actually carry out that authority hasn't been laid out. This would be the time you could have some flexibility in putting out some procedure. That's a good way. Just have it kind of fill in the gaps where there are already some existing provisions, and then take on new items to the extent your other documents are silent. In the Code of Ethics, we touched on that a little bit. I think where we are in the process was a bit of a surprise for some of us. So I worked, if you can see my screen, when I was preparing the Code of Ethics, I requested a copy of what was in place, and I was given a provision for a document that I was told was adopted. What we've learned since our meeting on April 18 is that at some point between adopting the version that I worked from, there was an amendment to a portion of the Code of Ethics. That too should have been generated prior to, with the cover memo and council's actions. But I'm not quite sure what is actually governing council's ability to speak as provided under section G, or paragraph G, of the Code of Ethics. The provision I worked from was just a basic communication provision. What was before council for adoption on the 18th is a provision that includes provision addressing how to, I guess, respond to media requests. So we need to know where we are on that, but I would just say the Code of Ethics, if that's a part of the rewrite, I will look forward to that, because there are certain provisions there that do raise red flags relative to the breadth, the scope of those provisions, and maybe impacting some of the individual counselor's rights. But I think those things should be sort of fleshed out a little bit more before the language is actually finalized. But there's a lot that can be done, but I think the efficiency of any action would be guided by what is the goal. So for me, I'm just going to keep asking, what really is it that you want to achieve with this document? And that might change over time, but at this moment, what do you want to achieve with this document?
Can I interject a question here? So Mike, can you provide some clarification, because you had spoken to us whenever we started this process, because Largo had a legislative policies manual. Can you give us a little more information about how you guys used it and what the contents of that legislative policy manual was?
The LPM that I was used to was basically what I would call a Cliff's Notes. It was basically all of the most commonly used and important information that the city council or the boards might need ready access to without having to go dig for it. So it had things such as the actual contact information for each of the council members. It had a listing of all of the active board members along with their contact information. And it had the table of contents actually was an influence for the table of contents that's in this LPM. But again, it was supposed to be all of those things that if a council member knew this is something we deal with on a regular basis, they could go right to that LPM and find the reference to it or the actual details without having to go digging. But it wasn't meant to be an end-all be-all reference document with tiebacks to every resolution the city's ever passed or every ordinance the city's ever passed. It was meant to be those things most commonly used and laying out some of the protocols and the policies that the council would have or adopt. So you may have things in there such as what time the council meetings start, what time the council briefings start, things as simple as that. References to Robert's rules so that anyone who's new to council understands this is how we conduct ourselves when we're in public. So it was really supposed to be a high level Cliff Notes kind of document. Sandy, and you're muted.
I do appreciate some of that clarity. I would just say where I would probably advise against how Largo does things is including specific contact information for individuals, because as that changes, then you're going to have to amend your legislative policy manual. So things that would sort of expose you to constant action of the policy manual actually kind of lend themselves to, would be things that I'd say seriously consider not doing. You know, we had in my previous experiences, both at the city, in a city level and a county level, the legislative policy manual that's utilized by Largo, we would have just simply called that our board of our rules and procedures, policies and rules of procedures. And so the document would contain mostly that kind of information. In one of my localities, that document was expanded to address other things affecting the governing body, such as the travel reimbursement policy. You know, what do you do for proclamations? You know, who has the power to do this for this purpose? But it would not get into some of the other things that I think are kind of more substantive that I'm seeing again in our current draft. So that's something to keep in mind. Is it really just a procedural document, primarily a procedural document for you, or you want to have a section on procedure and then a section on, you know, the inner workings of city council, how you conduct your citywide business on, you know, in your respective positions. And then maybe another section where you might point to some historical documents. I'm not quite sure what that would look like at this point, but you know, I think there is a way to sort of marry some of the different objectives, but having the overall vision is going to probably be the most valuable thing that you all can articulate for the purpose.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. Sandy's correct. If it's a legislative policies manual, it should be procedural. So where Robert's Rules of Order does not answer the questions as to what we're supposed to do next, this manual fits in all of those things. So the manual will say, unless superseded by the charter, unless superseded by ordinance, unless superseded by a whole bunch of other things, this is the process that we're using. I'm going through this ad nauseum at work right now because we do not have one of these. And we use Cannon's Rules of Order, which has a whole bunch of non-answered questions for procedure. And it leaves people saying, well, what are we supposed to do? And if nothing is clearly stated as to what the next step should be or who should be making that next step, it causes a lot of confusion and cloudiness, which ends up being very problematic to be able to make sure people maintain trust in the process that is going on. So our manual should really be, what is the process that we use in X, Y, and Z, where it goes into more detail than the parliamentary procedures, or where the parliamentary procedures are silent, or where parliamentary procedures conflict. And for the citizen who noted that you can't use Robert's rules because it's a public environment and there's a lot of conflict. Yes, there is. And the common piece is where it conflicts with government or sunshine laws, this policy here is the procedure that we'd use moving forward for those sections. So what it does, it provides a roadmap for anybody who's trying to make decisions or trying to understand the decision-making process of our local government, where our rules fit into state rules, which fit into federal rules, which also fit all into that Robert's Rules of Order, which is what we're choosing to use, which, may I say, is far better than going with the canon's Rules of Order, because, oh boy, that one's just bad. I mean, it's good in certain circumstances, but oh boy, stick with Robert's.
I have a question. Since the Code of Ethics was incorporated in the Legislative Policy Manual, but we did in fact adopt that first, is that considered the most important part of the Legislative Policy Manual? And the reason I raise that question is, if it's the most important, do you want us to start there in terms of proposing some tweaks, or riding with what we have until we go backwards and deal with the section of the LPM that has not been adopted yet?
I'll jump in. Ethics are important because ethics is what helps to build trust with citizens. That said, you want any parliamentary procedure, which is what the legislate what our policy manual will be laying out, to be done in an ethical sphere. So that doesn't answer your question. I do think that ethics should rise above procedural, or all procedures should be done in an ethical manner, to put it in a different way.
I think I understand.
Councilor Jansen.
Yeah, so when it comes to the ethics policy, we have one adopted. It's already in place. And the one that was written in the legislative policy manual is in conflict. So to me, this manual is has the potential of creating more conflict than maybe it's worth, at least the way it's written right now. We could procedure ourselves to death if we wanted to. When it's already written in ordinances, when it's already adopted in other language, to answer your first question, where do we want to go with this? If we want to set up a guideline for new counselors, well, let's just set something up like that. But when you say a legislative policy manual, that almost sounds like it's the one and only the go-to to get all your answers. And if there's some kind of conflict somewhere else, that new counselor may not pick up on that. So if we're going to adopt it as a legislative policy manual, I guess the very first thing should say this should only be used as a guide. This is not all inclusive. This is not, et cetera, and so on. But at this stage of the game, I'm not a big fan of it as a whole at this point. I mean, it needs a lot of rework on it, in my opinion.
Councilor Stokes.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in that I think that option 3 that Sandy presented is the correct option to allow her to go in and rework the document, get it in order, remove what is obsolete, or I feel like a lot of the stuff that is in the charter doesn't necessarily have to be there. I mean, maybe maybe point to where it's at, or point to where it is in the Muni code, but I don't know that we need to restate the everything 3 times. And I think that, I do think that we also should allow Ms. Robinson the opportunity to rework the ethics document. I think we have something adopted, which is good, unlike the legislative policy manual, which isn't adopted. But I think that in Sandy coming in and reviewing these has brought a new eye of things that are redundant and things that maybe should be added when she was talking about policy, procedures, those kind of things, I think would be great. I feel like this would be a perfect document to hand new counselors on their first day of school and say, here, let's read this, study it, and have a test on it at the end of the week, so that we know everybody's on the same page of what it is. Because I know as a new counselor, I didn't know everything, learned some lessons the hard way, but want to make sure that we set the next group up for further success. And so I think this document is vital for the success of the next wave of counselors.
Mayor Hoffman.
So I do think that we need this document, and I agree with Mike's presentation of why he suggested it. There are policies and procedures, but there are also practices, and there wasn't really one place to put all of those down. And I'm the only one who comes from being on council under our prior city manager. And there were a lot of things that we just did because that's the way we've always done it. And it wasn't really ever laid out anywhere. So for example, the Wave Maker Award, the proclamation procedure, things like that, that just aren't anywhere else that we can put in one place. So I do see a value. I agree with Chet completely. This is what you hand the new councilman on their first day of school, which is what I would suggest as a timeline, is to try to get this polished up before we seat or reseat our council members after the election. I am very, very scared of the redundancy of, if we make a change in one place, we have to find all of the other places, and the contact list, meeting schedules, things like that. I would, if it's possible, if this is up on our website, then I would just have all the appendices as links. So link them, hyperlink them right to where they are, where they exist in one place on our website, instead of having, that way you only have to update it in one place and then it's going to automatically update. So I don't know if that's something that we can do, but I think that that would be helpful instead of trying to repeat every single thing. I would like to see you take a chance at or take a shot at kind of tearing this apart and putting it back together. The order of it doesn't really make any sense. There's some random things in there that I think we could probably take a look at, not just alcohol, and I don't want to get into those details, but maybe this is something that we workshop sometime over the summer. Maybe we take 20 minutes when we're doing our budget hearings or something like that, and kind of tear it apart and put it back together, because I do think it's going to be a valuable document once we've got it where we want it.
Councilor Nichols.
Yeah, I just think in the condition it's in, it's a bit of overkill, and I'm fine with Ms. Robinson taking it, cleaning it up, just putting in an order that makes sense, and just referencing the other documents that the information's in, because this will eventually turn into a problem if we don't do it right. But I just don't think it needs to be as specific and written out as it is at this point. And I want it to be right. So thank you.
Sandy, there's no other hands raised. Do you think you have the direction you're looking for? All right, she nodded. Oh, you're muted.
I have enough to start with. I have my timeline, so I'll start working and then choose a time probably in early summer, midsummer, to bring back what the product looks like at that point in time and get your feel as to whether we're going in the right direction or we want to go in a different direction altogether.
Okay. That sounds good. With that, that takes us to item D. I have no miscellaneous items for you. E is committee assignment reports. If anyone has any report outs to give. Seeing a lot of no's on the head shakes, which takes us to future briefing topics. I see the mayor has her hand raised.
I have an announcement, so we can do it at the end. Just didn't want to forget to put my hand up.
Okay. Councilor Golding?
I believe all of you probably received an email from April Howard, who lives behind Penman Square, which is a commercial property that has used to have Gene Seafood in it. Now it's got Penman Diner and all of that. And she approached me because she has privacy concerns and she can't put an 8-foot fence in on the back of her property that would give her privacy between her residential property and the commercial property. And we don't have anything in our code that gives her the ability to request an exception or a variance or anything like that. I know that we're going to be working on the comp plan and the land development code, but in the meantime, we have a resident and her neighbors too, who are all having issues with this commercial property and the fact that there's, they have a lot of activity going on there. They have some homeless activity going on there. They're calling the police department, but that's not, it's affecting their quality of life. And I would like for us to consider having a future briefing topic to talk about just this very narrow thing of, is there something we can do for residents who have property that back up to a commercial property so that they have the ability to do something more than just a 6-foot privacy fence. So that I'm requesting that we consider having that as a future briefing topic.
I'm seeing a couple heads nod. Okay, we will schedule a briefing item to talk about basically residential to commercial buffers and what can be done for those.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, just as a piece of this, Neptune Beach does allow 8-foot privacy fences if a property is adjacent to a commercial property. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Councilor Dumont.
Oh, it was dealing with Sandy's thing. Contacted the powers that be. And yes, this will be discussed and it's on the list for the LDC rewrite with the comp plan. So the question ends up being, do we want to try and amend the LDC in the short term prior, if it falls along, what is the criticality of this piece? Do we need to do this as soon as possible, or can the resident and all the other residents who abut commercial property wait until the LDC has been revised? Because the feedback that I have gotten is, do we want to allow for a resident to put in a variance, Board of Adjustment request to do the 8-foot fence and if they abut commercial, or should we require commercial to put in an 8-foot fence if they abut residential? So there are questions that need to be handled in the long term, but is the resident willing to wait to see if the cost is going to fall on the resident or the commercial property owner? And even then, the commercial property owner would be grandfathered in, so they would be able to maintain the current fence. And we all got pictures of that sad fence. Sad fence. So it would really fall on, should a resident be able to go up to the 8-foot?
Can I just add that based on the schedule that we saw at the council meeting, I mean, we're looking at a year from now before we would even be able to have a change to the LDC. So when I met with a resident, you know, she's very frustrated and she's tired of living the way she's living. So that's why I'm bringing this to a briefing to request that we talk about it further.
I've dealt with the same thing with residents being frustrated with stuff, and yeah, I wish you better luck.
We'll dive into the details as part of a briefing topic and provide some options. And Mayor, you've got your hand raised because you still have an announcement.
Yeah, just an announcement since we don't have a council meeting before it, but April 30th is Take Back Day. It's a program run by the DEA to get people to turn back in unused pharmaceuticals, or even, I guess, illegal drugs if you want to, safely to you know, trained recipients. So there's a Project Opioid that's being run out of the Chamber of Commerce, and some others that did some kind of heat mapping of opioid related deaths. And Jacksonville Beach had a little bit of a hot spot. So this has previously been done in just, I think, one spot in the county. We all know how big our county is. So they thought that this might be a good place to set up a second one. Our police department is on board and is partnering with them. So it's going to be April 30th at our police department. I want to say 10 to 2, but if you guys can just go on to the PD's Facebook page, share that event. It's a good opportunity. So many opioid addictions and deaths are from started with drugs that are already in the house, already in the medicine cabinet that people just haven't thrown away or safely disposed of. So if you guys could help share the word on that, and we can make sure Jack's Beach location is a success. And you don't have to be a Jacksonville Beach resident to take part.
Amanda and I will be furthering our education and our degree in emo training on the 29th and 30th. So I'll share that.
Thank you.
Who are the two going to that? Ann and Fernanda. I know who your teacher will be. I'll tell them to be gentle with you. With that, that concludes our council briefing for tonight. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.